So now we are moving on. We're going to talk about the Cowboys. I promised I was going to talk about them. I had to cover that Jets news real quick. I know it took a good 10 minutes, but I covered it. So here's the question. Have the Cowboys failed as an organization? I could simplify it by just saying the name Dak Prescott, but it's a bit more complicated than that. In fact, it has more to do with the Cowboys choosing that over the name Tony Romo. It feels like Romo was the quarterback of the Cowboys a decade ago, but a choice that some say kept the Cowboys out of a Super Bowl happened just 3 years ago. It was a choice between Dak Prescott, fresh off a win streak, 8-1 record, or Tony Romo, fresh off of injury reserve. The Cowboys were headed into the playoffs on a win streak and had to choose between throwing in Tony Romo, who had been injured for the majority of the season, or to let Dak Prescott continue his run into the playoffs, where he would eventually lose his first playoff start. The team had gone 8-1 up to this point with Prescott under center, so it seemed like a no-brainer to let Prescott continue his dominance, and for the time being, it worked. Prescott threw 299 yards and 3 touchdowns the week after officially winning the starting job and went 4-2 through the remaining 6 games of the season to solidify a 13-3 record with a first-round bye. The Cowboys would lose the divisional round despite Dak throwing for 3 touchdowns and 291 yards to just 1 interception. So in the end, the argument that Romo should have led the Cowboys into the playoffs is silly, right? Let's look at it from another perspective, the experience perspective. It's hard to put up 3 touchdowns to over 250 yards in a playoff game as it is, but some NFL fans seem to believe Romo would or could have done better. In 2015, Romo threw 5 touchdowns to the 7 picks in just the 4 games he started. 5 to 7, that's not a good ratio. So the argument actually gains traction then when you look to Romo's last playoff appearance in 2014, 2 years earlier, in which he threw over 400 yards and 4 touchdowns to 0 picks over the course of a 2-game playoff run. In the playoff game, they lost against Green Bay in the divisional. Romo actually had a passer rating of 143.6, better than Aaron Rodgers' 125. But yet again, despite Romo's consistent playoff numbers, he had never made a run for the Super Bowl, or at least a deep run for the Super Bowl. He never made it to a championship, let alone the Super Bowl. So it's unfair to ridicule the Cowboys organization for going with Prescott, considering Romo hadn't played more than 6 games in the last 32 combined. Not to mention, again, Prescott played very well against the Packers in his playoff loss, arguably better than Romo played despite Prescott's lower passer rating. So the next argument, now that that's over, good. All right, the experience is fine. For that season, they chose Prescott and it worked. All right, argument done. Argument killed. The next argument, though, that many NFL fans seem to make is the Cowboys' choice to go with Prescott the following season. Let me put you in the shoes of the Cowboys organization right now. Before I do this, I'm going to try and define their argument a little better. What they're trying to say is that if you give Romo the team that Dak Prescott had going into 2017, a lot of people argue that Romo could have made a deep playoff run compared to what Dak Prescott did, which is go 9-7 and miss the playoffs. A lot of people argue that, and honestly, it's a fair question. Could Tony Romo do that? But you have to remember, Tony Romo hadn't played a full season in 2 years. He had struggled with injuries for his entire career. And Dak Prescott is a rookie quarterback that could be your franchise guy, who hasn't struggled with injuries. So, who are you going to choose? Again, let me put you in the shoes of the Cowboys organization. You have 2 quarterbacks. One of them just led you to a 13-3 record and a first-round bye. And the other one, who has struggled with injuries his entire career and doesn't have too much game film to look at as of late, hasn't played in 2 years, outside of just a handful of games. So it's really a no-brainer. Prescott was the right choice, no matter the fact that Prescott has yet to win a Super Bowl. A lot of people point to that. The season following Prescott's playoff loss to the Packers in his first year, Dak would lead the team to a 9-7 record, missing the playoffs. Many were quick to pin this on Dak, but he honestly had a mediocre at worst year. With 22 touchdowns and 13 picks, along with a 62.9 completion percentage, granted, not all-star numbers, but not numbers that would be the sole reason for a team failing to reach the playoffs either. They had a decent roster. He put up okay numbers for a franchise guy. Not star-studded numbers, as I said, but not terrible numbers either. So, for people to pin that entire season on Dak, I don't think it's fair. The next season, in 2018, the Cowboys would find success once again. Dak would lead the Cowboys to a 10-6 record, winning the NFC East and finding a wild card playoff spot in the process. He ended the season with a 67.7 completion percentage with 22 touchdowns, 3,885 yards, and 8 interceptions. A solid performance from Dak Prescott. And this transferred to a playoff win in which Dak would throw over 200 yards, a touchdown, and a pick against the Seattle Seahawks en route to the divisional round. The following week, the Cowboys would lose to the Rams, while Dak played an average once again with over 250 yards and a single touchdown, no picks. The following year, the Cowboys would go 8-8 despite Dak Prescott's easily his best career season, throwing over 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns, ultimately missing the playoffs. So I suppose what I'm trying to argue here is not that Dak Prescott is the best quarterback to play the game. I'm simply trying to dispel the theory that keeping Romo would have resulted in a dynasty for the Cowboys or even a Super Bowl win. If anything, Romo and Prescott almost seem like twins in terms of both regular season and playoff performances. They're not the best quarterbacks in the league, but they're not the worst. They're franchise quarterbacks. They're not elite. They're not bad. They're franchise average quarterbacks that if you put the right guys around them, they can get you to a Super Bowl. But you have to put the right guys around them. And here, as the Cowboys have hired a new coach, maybe this new coach is that right person around him he's been missing. We may see a playoff run in the near future with that. Those that have spared Dak Prescott in terms of blame have turned on Jason Garrett, a head coach who, despite having a top-tier offense and a solid defense in 2019, barely kept his head above the water with an 8-8 record, which ultimately was what caused the Cowboys to kick the bucket and get him out of Dallas. So, hey, maybe the Cowboys are back, but don't ever try to say that Romo is the diamond the Cowboys left in the dust for a rock, because it's simply not true. Dak Prescott's a solid franchise guy. He's not elite. He's not one of the best I wouldn't even say he's top 5, maybe top 10, top 15 for sure, but he's not an insane quarterback, but he's a franchise guy. He's a guy you want on your team to be there, to be a leader. He doesn't have to do a ton extra. You just got to put the right weapons around him. Build a solid foundation around him, and you'll have yourself a few playoff runs. That's what the Cowboys need to do, and they've completed the first step in that, which is getting the new head coach and firing Jason Garrett.